I had spent years dreaming of this house. The lake view, the quiet, the light through the south-facing windows. I poured over $4,000 into the housewarming party. It was supposed to be the start of a new chapter. But when I opened the front door that morning, it hit me like a slap. Pink and blue balloons floated above silk-draped tables. A giant banner read, "Welcome, Baby Grace." I froze. My mother, Elizabeth, stood by the archway, beaming like she'd built this life herself. Beside her, my stepfather Philip laughed with guests, as if nothing about this day was wrong. And there she was, Grace, lounging like a queen in emerald satin, one manicured hand resting on her stomach. This wasn't a housewarming party. This was a baby shower funded entirely with my money. I swallowed the heat rising in my throat and smiled. I couldn't let them see me flinch. Not yet. Because what they didn't know, what none of them saw coming, was that this wasn't just a party. This was the reckoning. I'm Rhea Langford, 33 years old, CEO of Equinox Dynamics, the woman they tried to erase from the family photo. But today, I came to reclaim the frame. I was 12 when my father passed away. I remember the silence after the machine stopped beeping, the kind of silence that never really leaves you. My mother, Elizabeth, cried for 3 days. Then, on the 4th, she changed. 3 months later, she married Philip Langford, a real estate developer with perfect teeth and a voice full of certainty. He moved into our home with his 5-year-old daughter, Grace. I still remember the first time I heard her laugh echo down the hallway. High-pitched, sugary, like it had never known the weight of loss. It wasn't that I hated her. I was just disappearing. By the time I turned 14, I'd been pushed out of my bedroom, the one filled with memories of my dad, the one with the bookshelf he built me. Elizabeth said Grace needed more space. "She's younger. You're more adaptable, Rhea." My protests were met with condescending smiles. The bookshelf was dismantled, my father's books boxed up and shoved into the attic. And just like that, I became a ghost in my own home. But the final blow came when I got accepted into Princeton. I was 17, holding the acceptance letter like it was oxygen, like maybe, just maybe, things would turn around. That night, I overheard them talking in the study. "She's not even my blood," Philip said. "Why should I pay for her to go to some fancy Ivy League school?" My mother's voice was low, almost apologetic. "Grace's tuition comes first. Rhea can attend community college. She's smart, she'll manage." I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Elizabeth told me with a smile so tight it could cut glass, "We just can't make it work financially. We know you'll understand." Understand? No, I didn't. And I never forgot. It was my grandparents, my dad's parents, who saved me. They drove 4 hours that weekend and sat with me on the back porch, holding my hands in silence as I broke down. "We'll cover it all," my grandfather said, his voice steady. "James would have done the same." He did more than that. He gave me back my dignity. Thanks to them, I made it to Princeton. I studied late nights. I interned. I built things no one believed I could. And all along I promised myself I would never go back. But here I was, standing in the lake house I had bought with my own hands, seeing my name erased from the celebration I'd created. Old wounds reopened like they'd never closed. But I wasn't that powerless girl anymore. I didn't climb the ladder, I built a new one. By 28, I was the lead architect behind Equinox Pulse, a real-time analytics system that reshaped how investment firms read market shifts. I still remember the moment the pilot program landed our first Fortune 100 client. I stood in the back of the boardroom, unseen, while our CEO, Daniel, shook hands with executives. He found me later that day. "No one sees the ocean coming like you do," he said. "I want you in the room next time." 4 years later, he made me CEO. And that's how I bought the lake house. Not a gift, not a legacy, not a handout. A reward I gave myself. It wasn't just real estate. It was a line in the sand. I made it. Without them. The housewarming party was my way of sharing that chapter, quietly, without fanfare. Close friends, mentors, a few colleagues from the early days, the kind of gathering that doesn't ask you to perform success, just to breathe it in. So I delegated the planning. I was in Singapore for a product launch. I wired $4,000 to my mother with instructions. Venue prep, catering, decor. Nothing extravagant, just elegant, simple. I trusted her with the logistics. I didn't trust her with much else, but I hoped, this might be safe ground. Then came the email. Important update about the party. The subject line read. Inside was a single photo. The lake house living room had been transformed. Pink and blue streamers curled around the beams. A massive balloon arch framed a chair covered in silk. A sign above the fireplace read, Welcome, baby Grace. I stared at the screen, waiting for the image to morph into something else. It didn't. I called her. She answered too quickly. Rhea, I'm so glad you saw it. I was just going to call. What is this? Her voice turned syrupy, manipulative. Honey, Grace is pregnant. This is her moment. You have everything. She has nothing. You can share, can't you? I didn't answer. She kept talking. Philip and I thought it would be nice. A family celebration. We sent out invites already. Don't worry, we called it a special occasion to keep it vague. There it was again. That smiling cruelty that looks like love from a distance. I hung up without another word. I wasn't angry, not yet. Anger implies surprise. No, what I felt was clarity. It had never been about Grace's needs. It was always about erasing mine. And this time, they wouldn't get away with it. I opened my messages and typed 5 words to my grandparents. Be at the lake house Saturday. Because they deserved to hear it from me. And I was done playing quiet. The night before the party, I drove up to the lake house alone. Massachusetts was still in late spring bloom, but the wind off the water carried a bite. I parked beneath the maples and just sat there for a while, the engine ticking in the silence. The house glowed softly from within. From the outside, it looked exactly as I had dreamed. Still, peaceful, mine. But I knew what waited inside. I stepped in anyway. The pink and blue decorations were already up. Streamers, bows, gift tables labeled with Grace's name. I could hear the ghosts of laughter that hadn't happened yet. And just like that, I was 16 again. I remembered the exact way my hands had trembled that day when I came home from school to find my bedroom cleared out. My bookshelf gone. My dad's books boxed and buried. Grace needs the space, Elizabeth had said. You're old enough to understand. But I hadn't. Not when they took me out of the family photo. Not when Philip sneered at my college dreams. Not when I spent 3 years sending holiday cards that were never answered. I used to lie awake wondering what I had done to be so replaceable. But somewhere between Princeton and Equinox, I stopped asking. And now, here I was. The silk chair, the balloon arch, the empty wine glasses ready for Grace's big day. I walked through the house slowly, like a guest, like someone inspecting the scene of a crime. When I reached the back deck, I stepped out into the cool night air and looked out across the water. This lake, this view, this house. It had cost me more than money. It had cost me silence, years of it. But not anymore. I pulled my phone from my coat and called my grandfather. He answered on the second ring. Rhea? Hi, Papa, I said. Are you and Nana still coming tomorrow? There was a pause. Of course. Are you okay? I looked out at the moonlight on the lake, felt the wind in my hair. I will be, I said. There's something I need to say, and I want you both to hear it. You've got us, he said. Whatever it is. I hung up and let the weight of his words settle around me like armor. And suddenly, memories flooded in. Of him, sitting on the bleachers at my swim meets, always in the same brown cardigan, clapping louder than anyone. Of my grandmother bringing me hot soup when I was sick at college, staying the night in a motel, just to make sure I had blankets. Of how, every birthday after my father died, they came without fail, even when Elizabeth forgot. There was a year I turned 17. I sat alone in the kitchen, with a candle stuck in a muffin. No one remembered, no one but them. They pulled into the driveway with a small cake and a gift-wrapped copy of The Alchemist. Inside was a note from my grandfather. Sometimes the treasure is the journey itself. I clutched that book like it was a lifeline. Maybe family isn't who raises you. Maybe family is who refuses to leave. I walked back inside and stood in the center of the room, right under the balloon arch. I imagined the people who would be here tomorrow. My mother in pearls, Philip, smug and stiff, Grace, glowing and smug and protected. And I imagined myself, not as a guest, not as an afterthought, but as the woman who built this house, the woman who could finally speak, and who no longer needed permission to be heard. Saturday arrived with sun glittering on the lake like a promise. Guests began arriving around noon. I watched them from the upstairs window as they laughed and posed for selfies by the welcome sign. Baby Grace on the way. I took my time getting ready. Navy blue dress, low bun, pearls, composure. If they expected me to look flustered, they'd be disappointed. When I finally descended the stairs, a hush fell for just a second. Then came the polite nods, the awkward smiles. Elizabeth saw me first. Her face lit up with false warmth. There she is! Rhea, honey! Philip stood beside her, drink in hand. Grace sat in the center of the room, draped across the decorated chair like a debutante. Kevin stood beside her, looking like he was still figuring out what kind of party he had walked into. I walked straight past them. Across the room by the fireplace stood my grandparents. My anchor, my truth. I kissed my grandmother on the cheek and squeezed my grandfather's hand. You look radiant, he whispered. Watch closely, I said. Then I turned, took a breath, and tapped the side of my wine glass. The room quieted. Conversations dropped. Cameras shifted. Thank you all for coming. I began, my voice steady. I know you were told today is a celebration for Grace. And it is. Pregnancy is a beautiful thing. I paused. But that's not what this day was supposed to be. A ripple moved through the crowd. I wired $4,000 to Elizabeth for this event. This was meant to be a housewarming celebration. My house, my milestone, my life. Gasps. Eyes darted toward my mother. She froze, smile gone, glass trembling in her hand. Instead, I walked into a baby shower I didn't agree to, for someone who has taken more from me than she'll ever understand. Philip took a step forward. Rhea, this isn't the time. I faced him squarely. No, Philip, this is exactly the time. He moved fast. His hand cracked across my face with a force that silenced the room. The sound echoed. No one moved. But I did. I straightened, slowly, deliberately. You just proved my point, I said coldly. For 18 years, I was expected to shrink, to give, to disappear. But not today. Grace looked pale. Kevin, her boyfriend, stared between us like he'd wandered into a war he never knew existed. I'm not a victim, I continued. I am the woman who built her life from rubble. And this house, it belongs to me. Philip opened his mouth, but before he could speak, my grandfather stepped forward. I have something to add, he said, voice calm, clear. The room turned. 3 months ago, Helen and I updated our will. Everything, our home, our investments, our accounts, goes to Rhea. Elizabeth gasped. Dad, what are you talking about? My grandmother stepped beside him. You made your choices, Liz. You abandoned your daughter. We're simply honoring that. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Grace stood. You ruin everything, she hissed, voice shaking. This was supposed to be my day. Kevin touched her arm gently. Grace, did you really use Rhea's money for this? She said nothing. You didn't even tell me, he added quietly. Don't you start, she snapped. You never take my side. Kevin's expression changed. Not angry, but tired, like something inside him had finally settled. I can't do this, he said simply. Then turned and walked toward the door. Philip roared, Get out, Rhea! You don't belong here. I turned to him, slow and sure. You're wrong, Philip. You're standing in my house. And then I walked away, not as a guest, not as a daughter, but as the only person in that room who had earned her place. The door slammed behind me, but the echo stayed. Inside, the party had cracked wide open. No music, no laughter, only stunned silence and broken expectations. My face still stung from Philip's slap, But the heat in my chest wasn't pain. It was purpose. I stood on the front steps, inhaling the scent of fresh-cut grass and lake water. For a moment, I thought I might cry. But I didn't. Because for the first time in years, I had said everything that mattered. A few minutes later, my grandparents emerged. They didn't speak, just came to stand beside me like two trees that had weathered every storm of my life. "Ready to go?" my grandfather asked. "More than ready." But just as we turned to leave, we heard it. Voices from inside, shouting. "Elizabeth, frantic. How could you humiliate me like that in front of everyone?" Philip barked back. "This is your fault. You never should have let her come." Their words pierced through the walls like knives, and then came Grace's voice, high and wavering. "Everyone always takes her side. Kevin, say something." We paused, hearing the tension inside stretch to its breaking point. Kevin's voice, firm and quiet, cut through. "I didn't know about the money, about all of it." "You weren't supposed to," Grace snapped. "It's not your business." "Grace," he said, with a finality I hadn't heard from him before. "You kept me in the dark. About this party, about her, about who you really are. I don't think I can do this." A long silence. Then the shuffle of footsteps. The door creaked open behind us. Kevin stepped out, his eyes meeting mine for the first time all day. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "You don't owe me an apology," I replied. "But you do owe yourself the truth." He gave me a quiet nod, then walked toward his car, alone. Grace didn't follow. We waited another minute, but the door remained closed. Philip and Elizabeth stayed inside, clinging to whatever illusion they still thought they had left. That was the last time I saw any of them, not out of hate, not even bitterness, just peace. Because some people don't deserve a second chance at your story. We drove away in silence. The lake shimmered in the rearview mirror, fading slowly as the road turned. My grandmother reached across the back seat and took my hand. "You did what we couldn't," she whispered. "You stood up to all of it." I didn't speak, just held her hand and stared out the window. In my mind, I was back on the front porch at age 8, curled in my dad's lap as he read me A Wrinkle in Time. The pages smelled like coffee. The porch light buzzed faintly above us. Back then, I thought nothing could ever take him from me. And when life proved me wrong, I thought nothing good could ever come again. But I was wrong twice. Loss doesn't erase love, and pain doesn't erase potential. I hadn't just walked out of a party that day. I had walked out of a story that never belonged to me, and stepped fully into my own. It's been 3 years. I'm now the CEO of Equinox Dynamics. The system I built, Equinox Pulse, is used by major corporations and government agencies across the globe. But titles aren't what matter to me now. What matters are the quiet victories. Sunday breakfasts with my grandparents, chess games on the lake house deck, herbal tea from my grandmother's garden. That's home. That's family. As for the others, Philip was forced into early retirement when his company restructured. His outdated methods couldn't keep up. Ironically, the new system they adopted was mine. Elizabeth's business faltered. They sold the big house and downsized. I haven't heard from her since. Grace gave birth. Kevin left soon after. I don't know what became of them, and I don't need to. I started a scholarship in my father's name, for kids like me, whose dreams were never nurtured at home. Each morning, I walk into my office past 2 photos, one of my father holding me as a baby, the other of my team celebrating launch day. They remind me that blood doesn't define family. Presence does. People say success is the best revenge. I say it's freedom. Freedom to speak, to walk away, to stop begging for love from those who never knew how to give it. I didn't win because I destroyed them. I won because I finally chose myself. And this time, no one gets to rewrite that story but me. I stayed quiet when my sister took credit for the business I built from scratch. I smiled, nodded, and raised a glass like everyone else at the party. But what came next wasn't in her script. My name is Cambria Wren, and for 5 relentless years, I turned my father's modest woodworking shop into a $30 million custom furniture brand. Not with flashy pitches or Ivy League connections, but with 16-hour days, sawdust in my lungs, and design sketches that lived rent-free in my head. I didn't ask for applause. I didn't need anyone's permission. And I certainly wasn't building it for a stage. But when the stage was set, at my father's birthday no less, and my sister Rena stepped into the spotlight to rewrite the story of our company, she didn't just steal credit. She tried to erase me. What she didn't know was, I had been planning for that moment long before she ever stepped back into our lives. Because some people wait for justice. I prepare for it. Most people think empires are built with vision boards and capital injections. Mine started with a broken stool. It was the summer after my first year at a state college when my father called me into the workshop. A customer's order had gone sideways. Poor measurements, mismatched wood, tension all around. He cursed under his breath, asked me to redraw the specs. I did. He looked at the revised drawing, nodded once, and said, "You've got better eyes than me." That was the first time I felt like I belonged there. My father, Hank Wren, ran the shop for nearly 2 decades. It was never glamorous, just a small 2-bay workspace off the side of Main Street. We made dining tables and shelving units for families who valued craftsmanship. Nothing fancy, just solid wood, honest joints, and enough money to pay bills on time. My mother did the books. I grew up with the scent of cedar soaked into my hair. My older sister, Rena, couldn't wait to leave it all behind. She had the resume of a Forbes article, valedictorian, Wharton, summer internships in New York, a life curated for admiration. I didn't envy her. I didn't need to. She was designed to shine under spotlights, while I learned to move best in the dark. After I graduated with a degree in applied design, I stayed. Everyone assumed it was because I lacked ambition. But I saw potential where they saw sawdust. The shop had history, but no future. And I was going to change that. The real shift started with an idea so simple, it almost felt foolish. Modular furniture, customizable but streamlined, pieces that could be tailored online, then efficiently built in-house. I taught myself 3D rendering software in the off hours, tested joints in the evenings, pitched the concept to Dad over black coffee and silence. He resisted, of course. He wasn't a man who believed in screens, but when my prototype sold 10 units to a boutique interior designer downtown, he looked at the check and muttered, "Maybe you're onto something." That was the moment I knew. We restructured the back end. I hired 2 local apprentices, upgraded the tooling system, and launched a simple website. Orders started coming in, mostly custom dining sets, desks, and accent pieces. I didn't sleep more than 5 hours a night that first year. We didn't have marketing. We had relationships. I called every customer after delivery. I asked for feedback. I sent handwritten thank yous. By year 3, we hit $2 million in revenue. We weren't a dusty workshop anymore. We were a brand. Wren and Company became a name among boutique hotels and interior decorators. And for the first time in his life, my father didn't just tolerate me, he respected me. I'd catch him bragging to customers, "That's Cambria's design. She runs the place now." But of course, every legacy casts a shadow, and mine came back wearing heels and a tailored coat from Chicago. Rena called late one evening, said she was thinking of reconnecting with her roots, that maybe it was time she helped scale the family venture. Her words were polished, vague, and strategic, just like everything else she did. She offered no apology for the years she vanished, just a promise to bring value. I knew better than to trust that tone, but my father didn't. The man who once questioned every idea I pitched welcomed Rena back like royalty. "Both my girls, side by side," he beamed. "Now this is the dream." I stayed quiet. But in the back of my mind, something ancient stirred, an instinct. The same one I had when I fixed that broken stool years ago. She thought she was coming to save us. She had no idea she was walking into my kingdom. Rena didn't return to join us. She returned to rebrand us. She walked through the front doors of Wren and Company like a polished CEO stepping into a takeover. Her heels echoed across the floor I had personally refinished last fall. Her smile was as smooth as a LinkedIn profile headshot. Dad introduced her to the team like she was the missing piece. "She'll bring in the structure," he said. "Cambria's the soul, and Rena's the system." It sounded like balance, but it was the beginning of fracture. She was named co-CEO by the end of the week. No trial, no discussion. Just a press release I wasn't consulted on. I read it over lunch while sipping cold coffee. My name was mentioned once, in the same line as our founding date. She didn't waste time. The first thing she did was bring in a marketing firm. "We need to reposition," she said, like we were some off-brand cereal that needed a glossy new box. Within days, our Instagram changed. Gone were the behind-the-scenes glimpses of our craftsmen at work, the custom commissions I hand-sketched with clients. Instead, it was full of sleek renderings, perfectly lit showrooms, and slogans like "luxury living," "limitless style." I stared at the caption. It didn't sound like us. It didn't even sound like furniture. It sounded like a product someone might scroll past at an airport lounge. When I questioned it, Rena didn't flinch. "This is how modern brands scale, Cambria." "And this," I replied, "is how they lose what made them matter." She didn't answer, just smiled like I was too sentimental to understand progress. Next came the move. Our workshop had always been tight but efficient. Production and design in one place, with just enough space for collaboration and chaos. Rena called it quaint, said we needed to impress high-end clients with a real space. She leased a massive warehouse with glass-walled offices, LED spotlights, and an echo so sharp you could hear someone breathing on the other end. It was impressive, until the work started falling apart. The team was confused. Layouts were inefficient. Deliveries got delayed. Clients called asking why timelines were slipping. But Rena only saw the surface. "It's transitional friction," she said, sipping espresso while giving tours to investors who didn't know maple from MDF. Then she started speaking over me. Designers I had mentored for years came to me with confusion. "Rena said you'd approved this," one said, holding up a blueprint I'd never seen. Another told me Rena assigned a project directly, bypassing our process entirely. When I brought it up, she smirked. "It's called delegation. You're not the only one capable of leadership." But leadership wasn't about telling people what to do. It was about trust, timing, clarity. Rena had none of those things. She had presence, optics, volume, and she used them well. Meetings began to happen without me. Product lines were pitched to retailers I hadn't even spoken to. One day, I opened our dashboard to see SKUs I didn't recognize already in prototype stage. Then came Eric, a strategic growth advisor, Rena called him. He wore perfect suits and spoke like a TED Talk come to life. Synergy, scale, vertical integration. His big plan? Outsource production overseas. "You'll increase margins by 40%, he said, pointing at slides that looked impressive but meant nothing. "We don't make bulk, we make custom," I said. "We sell trust, not turnaround." Rena tilted her head. "Cambria, you're thinking small." No, I was thinking human. But by then, she wasn't just reshaping the company. She was cutting me out of it. Every time I walked into a room, I felt it. Conversations pausing, eyes darting, decisions already made. She thought she was winning. But I wasn't gone. I was gathering, watching, preparing. Because I wasn't going to shout. I was going to strike. My father always hated attention. He liked simple things, a backyard grill, a worn flannel, a soda in hand. But Rena made his birthday feel like a tech launch. She rented out a downtown banquet hall, glass chandeliers, velvet table runners, a 3-tier cake shaped like our company logo. Guests wore blazers and cocktail dresses. There were no lawn chairs, no cousins, just clients, investors, and people who knew Dad more for his last name than his first. I arrived early, tried to offer help. Rena glanced at me over her shoulder and said, "Just enjoy yourself tonight. You're not needed here." Not needed? I nodded and moved through the room like furniture. Something noticed, but not spoken to. Some of my own team barely made eye contact. They weren't cold, they were confused. Everyone could feel something off, but no one knew what it was yet. Dinner was elegant, quiet. Waiters glided between tables like stagehands in a play. I hadn't been cast in. Then came the sound that made every fork pause. Rena tapping her wineglass. She stood at the head of the room with a microphone, poised like a keynote speaker. "I just want to say a few words," she began, smile sharp and camera ready, "about our father and about what comes next." Her tribute to Dad lasted all of 40 seconds, just enough to transition smoothly into her true purpose. "Wren and Company is growing," she said, "and growth requires clarity. It requires singular leadership, a clear vision. That's why, effective immediately, I'll be stepping in as sole CEO." There was silence, then applause. Trained, polite. People clapped like it was expected. I didn't move. Then she turned to me. "My sister Cambria has always been the creative heart of this company," she said, "and I'm grateful for that. But creativity alone doesn't scale. It doesn't lead. Some people thrive in technical roles, and that's where she truly excels." A pause, not a breath, a knife. In today's market, leadership requires more than craftsmanship. It requires vision, foresight, structure. And with all respect to my sister's contributions, it's time we let the company evolve beyond artisanal thinking. Every eye in the room turned toward me. I looked at Dad. He was smiling, proud, like this was the future he always dreamed of. Mom didn't look at me at all. I felt the heat rising in my chest, but I didn't stand to fight. I stood to leave. I walked to my father's table, placed a small box beside his plate. Handcrafted, dark walnut, a simple brass latch. "Happy birthday, Dad." Then I turned and left, heels clicking softly against polished floors. Not a word, not a glance back. Outside, the night was colder than I expected. My breath fogged the windshield before I could start the car. The tears didn't come, only stillness, and something sharper beneath it. Rena had used my silence as an invitation. She mistook restraint for surrender. She thought she'd made a move that couldn't be answered. What she didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that while she was rehearsing her speech, I'd already drawn the blueprint for the counterattack. She wanted an audience. She got one, but I was building something different. I wasn't going to make noise. I was going to make a reckoning. I didn't cry when I got home. I brewed tea, I opened my laptop, and I made war plans. Every document, contract, and forgotten clause I'd quietly accumulated over the years. All of it came back into focus. The ownership agreement, the licensing deal, the client clauses tied to my involvement. I didn't need vengeance. I needed leverage. At dawn, I closed my laptop. I didn't sleep. I didn't need rest. I needed results. At 6:45 a.m., I walked into the office. No one else was there yet. Just the hum of the security lights and the quiet before disruption. I went straight to the conference room, connected my tablet, laid out the documents. Rena and Dad arrived just after 9. She looked surprised to see me. "Didn't expect you here this early." I smiled. "I tend to show up for things I own." She laughed lightly, assuming it was a joke. It wasn't. "Let's talk," I said, gesturing to the screen behind me. I tapped the first document, our ownership agreement. I zoomed in on the section that mattered. 3 years ago, Dad needed funding for the warehouse lease. I bought in, an additional 13%, bringing my total to 53%. Dad squinted at the screen. "That can't be right." "It's your signature," I said calmly, enlarging it. Rena folded her arms. "So what? You're pulling out paperwork because your feelings got hurt?" "No. I'm reminding you both who actually holds decision-making power. Your speech last night was unauthorized. As majority shareholder, I never approved any leadership change." She opened her mouth, but I moved to the next file. "Our core designs, the ones that make up 80% of sales, aren't owned by Wren and Company. They're licensed through my private design company, Artisan Concepts." I clicked again. "That license expired this morning. I've chosen not to renew it." Rena leaned forward. "You're bluffing." I turned to her. "Without my designs, you have no product to sell." Dad's face fell. "You'd destroy the business?" "No, I'm saving it from the person trying to gut it for image." Outside the glass walls, employees began gathering. I could see their screens lighting up, phones buzzing. I also sent emails last night, I continued, to every major client. Most of our contracts contain exit clauses. If I'm no longer involved, they can walk. I projected the inbox onto the screen. Subject after subject. Termination confirmed. We're out. Thank you, Cambria. Rena's confidence began to crack. Her fingers tapped nervously at her phone. Notifications pinged like warning bells. Her voice wavered. You're imploding your own company. No, I said quietly. You tried to turn my company into a brochure. I'm restoring it. The silence thickened. I stood and laid out the final choice. You can resign, today, quietly. Or I walk away with my shares, my designs, and every contract tied to my name. You'll be left with an empty office, unpaid leases, and an answerless phone. Dad looked at me for a long time, and for once, he didn't see a second daughter. He saw the person who kept his legacy alive while he wasn't watching. He nodded almost imperceptibly. At 11:58 a.m., Rena signed the resignation letter. No camera crews, no applause, just a single pen stroke and silence. I walked back to my office, closed the door. Outside, I heard someone laugh faintly for the first time in days. The tension in the building began to lift like dust settling after a storm. The company was mine again. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt still, like a house after a fire. Not broken, just emptied of illusions. The day Rena left, the office didn't erupt in cheers. It exhaled, quietly, like a space that had been holding its breath for too long. But there was no celebration, only uncertainty. Team members avoided eye contact. Projects were half done, stuck in limbo between her chaos and my silence. People didn't know where they stood or where I stood. I spent the first few days putting out fires, fielding vendor calls, cleaning up broken timelines, reassuring old clients that the company was stable. Most of them didn't ask what happened. They just wanted to know who they were dealing with now. And that was fine, because I finally had an answer. I didn't make speeches. I showed up early, walked the floor, talked to the design team, spent lunch with the warehouse crew. I asked what they needed, not just to function, but to feel proud of what we were making again. Some looked surprised I even asked. They weren't used to being heard. Rena hadn't built a team. She had built a spotlight and made everyone else background actors. I was doing the opposite. We stopped the influencer campaigns, cut the over-designed packaging, stripped things down to the heart of the business. Craftsmanship, personal service, quality. The people who stayed appreciated it, and the clients we called, one by one, responded to it. Still, Rena didn't disappear. Less than 2 weeks after her resignation, I saw her posts, polished blurbs about managing leadership misalignment, navigating change, and learning to let go. She didn't name me, but the implication was clear. I was the inflexible tyrant who had forced her out. At first, I ignored it, until a vendor emailed me, hesitating on a renewal. Their wording was careful, but the concern was there. We've heard things. Are you in full control now? That was the moment I knew silence had done enough. I scheduled a company-wide meeting. It wasn't dramatic, no slideshow, no branded intro. Just me, standing in front of the people who'd quietly kept this place running while everything around them cracked. I know this year's been a storm, I said, but we're still here, because of you, and we're not rebuilding what Rena wanted. We're restoring what we believe in, together. Silence at first, then something shifted. A designer raised his hand, not with a question, but with an idea. Another followed. By the end of the day, the energy had changed. People looked me in the eye again. Some even smiled. It wasn't victory, it was trust, and this time, I'd earned it not through noise, but through action. My father never said sorry. Rena never came back, and I never looked back. Wren & Company isn't louder now. It's quieter. But it's steady, focused, ours again. The clients stayed because we stopped trying to impress them and went back to serving them. The team stayed because I listened. And I stayed, not to fight for a seat at the table, but to build the table itself. This company was never meant to shine on stage. It was meant to last behind the scenes, in the hands of people who care. I don't need to be seen, I just need it to stand.